"Your time is up. Foreclosure begins tomorrow," announced Victor Hargrove, adjusting his platinum cufflinks as he slid the final eviction notice across Rebecca Winter's worn kitchen table. The newly widowed mother's hands trembled as real estate agents already evaluated her small family home for resale value. But 3 months later, when county historians and archaeology experts gathered in the abandoned restaurant kitchen, Hargrove's smug confidence vanished as Professor Thomas Williams carefully pulled back the weathered floorboards, revealing a hidden tunnel entrance lined with Civil War-era markings. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rebecca Winters stood by the window of her modest rental apartment, watching raindrops trace jagged paths down the glass. The small severance check from Millbrook Community Hospital, her final paycheck after 15 years as a nursing assistant, sat unopened on the table. 6 months since David's sudden heart attack had transformed her world, leaving her alone with mounting bills and painful memories. "Mom, I got the mail," called Lily, her 16-year-old daughter, entering the apartment with a stack of envelopes. The teenager's face, once constantly animated with dreams of art school and photography, had grown serious beyond her years. Her college fund had been the first casualty of their financial collapse, a sacrifice that haunted Rebecca daily. "Anything good?" Rebecca asked, forcing a smile. Lily sorted through the envelopes with practiced efficiency. Bills, another sympathy card from Aunt Corrine, and... She paused, holding up a cream-colored envelope. "Something from Dad's lawyer?" Rebecca took the envelope, feeling its unexpected weight. Inside she found a brief note from James Patterson, David's longtime friend and attorney, along with a small key. Rebecca found this while clearing final paperwork. David left specific instructions that this storage locker key should come to you directly upon his passing. Location details enclosed. James. The storage facility sat on the outskirts of Millbrook, a gray concrete building with rows of identical metal doors. Rebecca followed the directions to Unit 227, inserted the key, and lifted the rolling door with a metallic groan. The space was nearly empty, just a single weathered trunk centered beneath the harsh fluorescent lighting. "Dad never mentioned a storage unit," Lily whispered, her voice echoing slightly. Inside the trunk, they found a collection of items that initially seemed random: old ledgers, photographs of Millbrook's historic district, newspaper clippings about local Civil War history, and a folder containing detailed architectural drawings of a building Rebecca recognized as Hartwell's, a once popular restaurant in downtown Millbrook that had closed years ago. A sealed envelope addressed to Rebecca in David's familiar handwriting lay beneath these items. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and began to read. "My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, fate hasn't allowed me to share this journey with you. I've spent years piecing together a historical puzzle that began when my grandfather shared stories of a secret he'd discovered during renovations of the old Hartwell building in 1954. The restaurant sits above something valuable, something that could secure your future if I couldn't. I've gathered all the evidence, but never had the resources to pursue it further. This is my contingency plan for you and Lily. Follow the maps. Find what's beneath. All my love, David." Attached was a property listing showing that Hartwell's was scheduled for demolition, with the land to be redeveloped by Hargrove Properties into luxury condominiums. "Dad was treasure hunting?" Lily asked, examining a hand-drawn map showing what appeared to be tunnel systems beneath downtown Millbrook. Rebecca studied the materials with growing confusion. David had been a practical man, a hospital maintenance supervisor who fixed things, who planned methodically, who never mentioned treasure hunting or historical research. This hidden passion seemed to belong to a stranger. "I don't understand," she admitted. "Why wouldn't he tell me about this?" "Maybe he wanted to surprise you," Lily suggested, already photographing the documents with her phone. Like, find it first, then tell you. That night, Rebecca pored over David's research. The narrative that emerged was fascinating. During the Civil War, Millbrook had been a strategic railroad junction. According to local legends, when Union forces approached in 1864, Confederate supporters had hidden a significant cache of gold somewhere in town. Most historians dismissed the tale as folklore, but David had meticulously connected historical accounts, property records, and architectural anomalies pointing to a specific location beneath what was now Hartwell's restaurant. According to his notes, the restaurant building had originally been a supply depot connected to a network of emergency evacuation tunnels. Renovations in the 1920s had sealed off these tunnels, but David believed they remained intact beneath the kitchen, along with whatever had been hidden there. The following morning, Rebecca called Hargrove Properties, inquiring about the Hartwell building. The receptionist transferred her to Victor Hargrove himself, his voice smoothly professional. "Mrs. Winters, isn't it? I knew your husband slightly. My condolences." "Thank you," Rebecca replied. "I'm calling about the Hartwell property. Has it been sold?" "Not yet. It's scheduled for demolition next month. The building is structurally unsound, more valuable as land than as that dilapidated restaurant. We're accepting bids from developers. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Rebecca took a deep breath. "Would you consider selling the building itself before demolition?" A pause. "That would be unusual. The property has significant liens against it from the previous owners. The title situation is complicated. How much to clear the liens and take ownership before demolition?" Hargrove's laugh was dismissive. "Mrs. Winters, the legal fees alone would be substantial. But if you're serious, perhaps $40,000 would make it worth our while to navigate the paperwork. The building is worthless. The real value is in clearing it and redeveloping." Rebecca thought of her depleted savings, the outstanding medical bills, the second mortgage she'd taken to cover David's funeral expenses. What if I just wanted to purchase the contents? For salvage? Another pause. Contents? Hargrove seemed genuinely perplexed. "It's been abandoned for years. There's nothing inside worth taking. Still, there might be architectural elements I'm interested in. For sentimental reasons, I suppose $400 for salvage rights? You'd have 2 weeks before demolition, and you'd need to sign liability waivers. The building isn't safe." Rebecca agreed immediately, arranging to meet the following day to sign paperwork and pay the $400, nearly half her remaining cash. "Mom, are you serious?" Lily asked when Rebecca explained the plan. "You're spending our grocery money at an empty restaurant because Dad left some treasure maps?" "Not just maps," Rebecca corrected. "Your father spent years researching this. He believed in it enough to keep it secret until he was sure. I owe it to him to at least look." Lily's expression softened. "I miss him too, but what if there's nothing there?" Rebecca had no answer. The following afternoon, Rebecca met Victor Hargrove at his downtown office, a sleek glass building that towered over Millbrook's historic district. Hargrove was younger than she expected, perhaps 40, with carefully styled hair and a suit that probably cost more than her car. He smiled without warmth as his assistant brought in the paperwork. "Mrs. Winters, I've drawn up a simple salvage agreement. You have salvage rights for 14 days, at which point demolition proceeds as scheduled. You absolve Hargrove Properties of any liability for injuries sustained in the building, which is, I repeat, structurally unsound." Rebecca signed where indicated, handed over 4 crisp $100 bills, and received a set of keys in return. "May I ask what you're hoping to find?" Hargrove inquired, curiosity finally overcoming his professional detachment. "Just some original woodwork," Rebecca lied. For sentimental reasons. Hargrove's eyes narrowed slightly. Of course, sentiment. Well, good luck with your salvage operation. Rebecca left feeling his eyes on her back, wondering if she'd revealed too much. Hartwell's restaurant stood at the corner of Maple and 3rd, its faded sign barely visible against weathered brick. Once the pride of downtown Millbrook, it had closed 5 years earlier, when the owner retired with no buyers interested in a struggling restaurant in a declining downtown district. Rebecca unlocked the heavy front door, its hinges protesting. Inside, dust motes danced in sunlight streaming through grimy windows. The dining room retained hints of former elegance, ornate ceiling moldings, a long mahogany bar, booth seating with cracked leather upholstery. The place smelled of neglect and faded memories. "This is creepy," Lily commented, having insisted on accompanying her mother despite Rebecca's concerns about safety. "Like a restaurant zombie." "Let's find the kitchen," Rebecca suggested, consulting David's notes. They made their way past the bar to swinging doors that opened into a commercial kitchen. Industrial refrigerators stood silent, their doors hanging open. Steel prep tables reflected dull light from overhead fixtures. At the center of the room, exactly where David's notes indicated, was a large island workstation. "The entrance should be beneath this," Rebecca said, examining the floor. Unlike the dining room's hardwood, the kitchen featured industrial tile newer, covering whatever had been there before. "How do we get under it?" Lily asked, already photographing everything with her phone. Rebecca consulted David's notes again. "According to this, there should be a specific pattern in the tile layout, a square that doesn't quite match the surrounding pattern." They began searching methodically, moving around the kitchen island, studying the floor. It was Lily who found it, a subtle irregularity in the grout lines forming a nearly perfect square about 3 feet across. "Here, Mom, look at this." Rebecca knelt, tracing the outline with her finger. "Now we need something to pry it up." They searched through abandoned kitchen tools until Lily found a heavy metal spatula. Rebecca worked it into a slight gap in the grout and leveraged upward. The section of flooring resisted, then lifted slightly. Working together, they managed to raise one corner enough to grip it properly. With a final heave, they lifted the section of floor away, revealing not a tunnel entrance as they'd expected, but a shallow recess containing a metal strongbox. "Is this it?" Lily asked, disappointment evident in her voice. Rebecca carefully lifted out the box, heavy, but not unusually so. It was locked, with no key in sight. "Let's take it home," she suggested. "We can figure out how to open it." That evening they examined the box carefully. No manufacturer's name, no obvious way to pick the lock. Finally, Rebecca remembered something from David's documents. A series of numbers she'd assumed were map coordinates. On a hunch, she tried them as a combination for the box's lock. The lock clicked open. Inside lay several items: a leather-bound journal, a small cloth bag, and an aged envelope sealed with wax. Rebecca's hands trembled as she carefully broke the seal and unfolded the contents: a handwritten letter dated April 12, 1864, and a map drawn on yellowed parchment. "To whomever discovers this record," Rebecca read aloud, "I, Colonel Samuel Prescott, entrust the location of our regiment's gold reserve, removed from bank vaults for safekeeping as Union forces advance toward Millbrook. We have concealed $20,000 in gold coin within the tunnel system beneath this depot, accessible via the marked entrance. Should our cause fail, may these resources eventually serve to rebuild what war has destroyed. The main cache lies where the 3 tunnels converge, behind a wall marked with 3 stars. May God protect this treasure until it can be recovered for its rightful purpose." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. $20,000 in 1864 gold would be worth over $1 million today, Lily whispered, having already calculated on her phone. Maybe more depending on the coins. Rebecca carefully opened the cloth bag, tipping its contents onto the table. 5 gold coins dated 1861, gleaming in the lamplight. Proof, she breathed. This is real. But Mom, Lily said, pointing to the map, this shows 3 tunnels. We only found a box. Rebecca studied the map more carefully. The box was placed there later, probably during renovations. The real entrance must be elsewhere in the kitchen. Over the next 3 days, they systematically searched the kitchen floor, tapping tiles and listening for hollow spaces beneath. They found nothing. On the 4th day, Rebecca began examining the walls, wondering if the entrance had been vertical rather than horizontal. Behind a massive refrigerator unit, they discovered an anomaly, a section of wall that sounded different when tapped. Working together, they managed to move the refrigerator far enough to reveal old brickwork that didn't quite match the surrounding pattern. This is it, Rebecca said with growing excitement. Help me look for a mechanism, a loose brick, something that might trigger an opening. It was Lily who found it, a brick that moved slightly when pressed. When she pushed harder, a grinding sound emerged from behind the wall, and a section of brickwork swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. Flashlights revealed a narrow brick-lined tunnel extending beneath the building. The air that emerged was cool and surprisingly fresh, suggesting ventilation somewhere in the system. We should wait, Rebecca said hesitantly. Get proper equipment. Maybe tell someone where we're going. Tell who? Lily countered. That we're hunting for Confederate gold based on Dad's treasure maps? They'll think we're crazy. Rebecca knew her daughter was right. Tomorrow, she compromised. We'll come prepared with better lights, proper shoes, maybe rope. That night, Rebecca could barely sleep. David's research, dismissed by their practical minds as fantasy, was proving accurate at every turn. What else had she failed to understand about the man she'd been married to for 18 years? The next morning, Rebecca called the local historical society, asking carefully general questions about Millbrook's Civil War history. The volunteer she spoke with was enthusiastic but knew nothing about Confederate gold or tunnel systems. For all David's research, the secret remained remarkably well preserved. At the hardware store, Rebecca purchased heavy-duty flashlights, work gloves, dust masks, and a coil of rope. The clerk raised an eyebrow at her purchases. Doing some serious exploring? Just cleaning out an old basement, Rebecca replied, with a casual smile that felt foreign on her face. She'd never been a good liar, but circumstances were teaching her quickly. When they returned to Hartwell's, they discovered something alarming. The front door, which Rebecca had carefully locked behind them, was slightly ajar. Inside, footprints in the dust showed someone had been there in their absence. Someone knows, Lily whispered, fear evident in her voice. Rebecca moved cautiously through the dining room toward the kitchen, listening for any sound. The kitchen appeared undisturbed. The refrigerator still moved away from the wall, the tunnel entrance still exposed. Maybe it was just kids, Rebecca suggested without conviction. Let's hurry. Equipped with their new gear, they entered the tunnel. It extended approximately 30 feet before branching in 3 directions, exactly as the map had indicated. Rebecca consulted the parchment, carefully, trying to orient herself. This way, she said finally, pointing to the rightmost passage. According to the map, the 3 tunnels eventually converge in a larger chamber. That's where the gold is supposed to be. They proceeded cautiously, the brick-lined passage gradually sloping downward. After approximately 50 yards, it joined a larger tunnel coming from the left. They continued forward, now in a passage wide enough for them to walk side by side. These were serious tunnels, Lily observed, her flashlight beam revealing the skilled brickwork. Not just for hiding treasure. Escape routes, Rebecca confirmed, remembering David's research. In case of attack during the war. Another 100 yards brought them to a third junction where the remaining passage merged with theirs. Just beyond this convergence, the tunnel widened into a small chamber with a brick wall at the far end. And there, clearly visible in their flashlight beams, were 3 stars carved into the brickwork. "That's it," Rebecca breathed. "That's the mark from the letter." They approached the wall cautiously, examining the brickwork for any sign of an opening mechanism. Unlike the entrance behind the refrigerator, this wall appeared solid. "Maybe we have to remove the bricks?" Lily suggested. Rebecca examined the mortar between bricks. "It looks different here. See how the color doesn't quite match?" "I think you're right." Using a screwdriver from their supplies, Rebecca began, carefully chipping at the mortar around one of the marked bricks. It came loose more easily than expected, suggesting it had been designed to be removed. When she pulled it free, they discovered a small cavity behind it containing what appeared to be a handle. "Stand back," Rebecca warned, grasping the handle firmly. She pulled, meeting resistance at first, then feeling something give way with a grinding sound. A section of the wall, disguised to match the surrounding brickwork, swung slowly outward. Their flashlights revealed a small chamber beyond, perhaps 10 feet square. And there, stacked against the far wall, were wooden crates stamped with Confederate military markings. Rebecca stepped forward cautiously, her flashlight beam trembling slightly. The first crate was sealed, its wood darkened with age but remarkably preserved in the cool, dry environment. Using the screwdriver again, she carefully pried up one corner of the lid. Gold coins gleamed in the flashlight beam, stacked in neat rows. "It's real," Lily whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the chamber. "Dad was right." Rebecca felt tears forming. David had discovered this, had spent years researching, planning, preparing, all as a contingency to protect his family if something happened to him. He'd created a safety net they'd never known about until they needed it most. Their celebration was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the tunnel behind them. Rebecca spun around, placing herself between Lily and the entrance to the chamber. Victor Hargrove stepped into view, flashlight in one hand, what appeared to be a small revolver in the other. "Mrs. Winters," he said, his voice echoing in the confined space. "It seems your interest in architectural salvage was somewhat understated." Rebecca's mind raced. "Mr. Hargrove, this is unexpected." "Is it?" When someone with obvious financial difficulties suddenly shows interest in an abandoned building scheduled for demolition, it raises questions. When that someone is the widow of a man known to have researched local history extensively, those questions become compelling. "You knew my husband was researching this?" Hargrove smiled thinly. "Millbrook is a small town, Mrs. Winters." David made inquiries at the county records office, the historical society. "People talk. I simply never believed there was anything to find, until you showed such specific interest in the building." "The salvage agreement gives me rights to what's in the building," Rebecca stated, trying to sound more confident than she felt. A clever legal point. "However, I believe this chamber technically extends beyond the property line into the municipal area beneath 3rd Street, a gray area, legally speaking." He gestured with the gun. "But let's not quibble over technicalities. You've made a remarkable discovery, one that deserves proper archaeological attention, don't you think?" Rebecca understood the implied threat. Hargrove could claim the discovery, use his influence to navigate the legal complexities, potentially leaving her with nothing. "What do you want?" she asked directly. "A partnership," Hargrove replied smoothly. "You found the treasure, but I control access to it through the property above. I also have the resources to manage the legal complexities of a historical find of this magnitude. The city, the State Historical Society, possibly the federal government, all will have claims once this becomes public. And if we refuse," Hargrove's expression hardened, "then I seal the restaurant immediately for structural concerns." bringing in experts who will inevitably discover this tunnel system during pre-demolition inspections. Your salvage agreement doesn't permit structural alterations, which I could argue you've made by opening sealed passages. Legal battles could take years, during which time the gold remains inaccessible. Rebecca felt Lily's hand grasp hers, squeezing tightly. They were trapped, both physically in this chamber and legally by Hargrove's machinations. What kind of partnership? Rebecca asked, playing for time, desperately trying to see a way out. Simple. We document the find properly, with you credited as the discoverer. I provide legal representation and negotiate with relevant authorities. We split whatever proceeds are eventually permitted to private ownership, 60% for me, 40% for you. Given the historical significance, much may be claimed by museums, but even a fraction of this find would be substantial. It wasn't fair, but it was better than nothing. Rebecca considered their options, remembering something from David's research, something about the tunnel system having multiple exits. We need time to consider your offer, she said carefully. Hargrove shook his head. I'm afraid I must insist on an immediate decision. My construction team is scheduled to begin preliminary work tomorrow. Once they arrive, this becomes considerably more complicated. Just an hour, Rebecca pleaded. To discuss privately with my daughter. This affects her future too. Hargrove considered, then nodded reluctantly. 1 hour. I'll wait in the restaurant. Don't try anything foolish, Mrs. Winters. I've taken the precaution of securing the entrance we used. After he departed, footsteps echoing down the tunnel, Rebecca turned to Lily. There's another way out. There has to be. These tunnels were built as escape routes. Lily was already examining the chamber carefully, her flashlight beam moving methodically across the brick walls. Here, she said suddenly, pointing to what appeared to be ordinary brickwork. Look at the pattern interruption. It's subtle, but it's there. Rebecca saw it now, a slight irregularity in the brick pattern, similar to what they'd found in the kitchen. Together, they began examining the area, pressing bricks, looking for any mechanism. It was Rebecca who found it, a brick that moved slightly when pushed in a specific direction. When she applied more pressure, they heard a click, and a section of wall swung inward, revealing another passage. Hurry, Rebecca urged, grabbing one of the smaller wooden boxes from the cache. We can't carry much, but we need proof. Lily took another small box, and they entered the new passage, pulling the hidden door closed behind them. This tunnel was narrower, clearly an emergency exit rather than a main passage. They moved as quickly as they dared, following its course as it gradually sloped upward. After several hundred yards, they encountered a brick wall with a rusted metal ladder leading upward to what appeared to be a trapdoor. Rebecca climbed first, pushing against the heavy door. It resisted, then gave way with a shower of dirt and debris. They emerged into an overgrown area behind what Rebecca recognized as St. Paul's Episcopal Church, one of Millbrook's oldest buildings, located 2 blocks from Hartwell's. The trapdoor had been disguised as an old garden shed foundation, completely hidden by decades of vegetation growth. We made it, Lily breathed, helping Rebecca cover the trapdoor with debris again. But what now? Rebecca checked her watch. Hargrove will realize we're gone soon. We need help, someone with authority who might believe us. Professor Williams, Lily suggested immediately, from the Historical Society. He guest lectured at school last year about Millbrook during the Civil War. He'd understand the significance. Rebecca nodded. Thomas Williams was respected in the community, a history professor at the State University who served as a consultant for the local Historical Society. If anyone would appreciate the historical significance of their discovery and potentially help navigate the legal complexities, it would be him. They made their way through back streets to Rebecca's car, parked several blocks from Hartwell's. The wooden boxes, heavy with gold coins, remained hidden under their jackets. As they drove toward the university, Rebecca glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Hargrove in pursuit. "What do we tell Professor Williams?" Lily asked, nervously checking the boxes they'd taken, each containing what appeared to be 50 gold coins. "The truth," Rebecca decided. "All of it, including Hargrove's threats." Professor Thomas Williams was in his office, surrounded by books and historical artifacts. He looked up in surprise as Rebecca and Lily were shown in by his assistant, clearly not expecting visitors so late in the afternoon. "Mrs. Winters, isn't it?" he said, rising from his desk. "And Lily, what can I do for you?" Rebecca took a deep breath. "Professor Williams, we've discovered something that I think you'll find significant. It concerns Millbrook's Civil War history." Williams raised an eyebrow. "Indeed? Please sit down." For the next 15 minutes, Rebecca explained everything. David's research, the tunnel system, the hidden chamber, and finally, the Confederate gold. Williams listened without interruption, his expression shifting from polite interest to intense focus. When Rebecca mentioned Hargrove's appearance and threats, his brow furrowed with concern. "This is extraordinary," he said finally. "If accurate, it would be the most significant Civil War discovery in this region in decades." "It's accurate," Lily stated firmly, placing one of the wooden boxes on his desk. "See for yourself." Williams carefully opened the box, his eyes widening at the sight of the gold coins. He picked one up, examining it closely. "1861 Confederate issue," he murmured. "In remarkable condition." He looked up sharply. "And you say there are multiple crates of these?" Rebecca nodded. "At least 6 that we saw, plus documents, the letter I described." Williams reached for his phone. "This requires immediate action. The historical value alone, quite apart from the monetary worth, demands proper archaeological documentation. And Mr. Hargrove's involvement is concerning." He made several calls in rapid succession to the university's archaeology department, to the State Historical Preservation Office, and finally, to the Millbrook police chief, a personal friend. "Chief Anderson will meet us at Hartwell's," Williams explained, gathering his coat, "along with a team from the archaeology department. The gold is significant, but the intact tunnel system and chamber may be even more valuable historically. We need to secure the site before anything is disturbed, or before Mr. Hargrove takes any further action." As they drove back to Hartwell's, Rebecca felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief at finding a powerful ally, anxiety about confronting Hargrove again, and beneath it all, a deep sense that David was somehow with them, his years of careful research finally fulfilling its purpose. When they arrived, they found Hargrove's luxury car still parked outside the restaurant. Police Chief Michael Anderson was already there, along with 2 officers and a van from the university's archaeology department. "Professor Williams," the chief greeted them. "Mrs. Winters, I understand we have a situation involving historical artifacts." Williams quickly summarized what Rebecca had told him, showing one of the gold coins as evidence. The chief listened seriously, then turned to his officers. "Secure the building. No one leaves until we sort this out." Inside Hartwell's, they found Victor Hargrove in the kitchen, his expression darkening when he saw Rebecca and Lily accompanied by Williams and the police. "This is private property," Hargrove began, but Chief Anderson cut him off. "Mr. Hargrove, we're here investigating a report of historical artifacts discovered on this property, artifacts of significant value that may fall under state historical preservation statutes." Hargrove's composure slipped momentarily. "Any artifacts found are covered by my ownership of the building and Mrs. Winters' salvage agreement, which gives me controlling interest." "Actually," Williams interjected, "artifacts of historical significance automatically trigger state preservation protocols, especially when they relate to Civil War history. The legal ownership becomes considerably more complex." While they talked, The archaeology team had discovered the tunnel entrance behind the refrigerator. Professor Sarah Jenkins, the team leader, emerged from a preliminary inspection, her expression excited. "It's extraordinary," she reported. "The tunnel system is intact, showing Civil War-era construction techniques. And the chamber." She held up a Confederate military document she'd found. "This site will need to be properly excavated and documented. It's a historical treasure trove." Hargrove's face had grown increasingly pale. Chief Anderson turned to him with a serious expression. "Mr. Hargrove, Mrs. Winters has alleged that you threatened her and her daughter with a weapon in the tunnel system. Is this accurate?" "Absolutely not," Hargrove replied smoothly. "I simply expressed concern about trespassing beyond the building's foundations, which wasn't covered by our salvage agreement." "He had a gun," Lily stated firmly. "He threatened to lock us out of the discovery if we didn't agree to his terms." Chief Anderson's expression hardened. "We'll need to take statements from everyone. And Mr. Hargrove, I'll need to see any firearms you might have with you." Hargrove hesitated, then reluctantly produced a small revolver from his jacket pocket. "I have a permit. The building is in a deteriorating neighborhood. It was merely a precaution." "We'll verify that," the chief replied, carefully taking the weapon. "In the meantime, Professor Jenkins and her team will secure the site for proper archaeological assessment." As Hargrove was escorted outside to give his statement, Professor Williams turned to Rebecca with genuine admiration. "Your husband's research led to a discovery that will rewrite local history books. This isn't just about the gold, though that's certainly significant. It's about preserving a piece of history that would have been destroyed in the demolition." Rebecca felt tears forming again, thinking of David's meticulous notes, his secret efforts to provide for his family. He would have loved to see this. The history was always more important to him than the treasure. Over the next several weeks, the discovery at Hartwell's transformed Millbrook. The State Historical Society officially designated the site for preservation, preventing demolition. Archaeological teams carefully documented the tunnel system and recovered the gold. Cash, 6 crates containing approximately 18,000 gold coins, with a combined value exceeding $3 million. The legal resolution proved complex, but ultimately favorable for Rebecca. As the discoverer working under a legal salvage agreement, she was entitled to a finder's fee of 30% of the gold's value. The remainder would be preserved for historical purposes, with most coins going to museums but their value benefiting the community through establishment of a historical preservation fund for Millbrook's downtown district. Victor Hargrove faced legal consequences for his actions in the tunnel, ultimately accepting a plea deal that included community service and a substantial donation to the Historical Preservation Fund. His development company's reputation suffered significantly when his tactics became public. Rebecca and Lily moved from their small apartment into a modest house near the high school. Lily's college fund was restored and expanded. Most importantly, the discovery brought renewed interest in Millbrook's history, with plans to restore the Hartwell building as a museum featuring the tunnel system and exhibits about the Civil War in the region. 3 months after the discovery, Rebecca stood in what had been Hartwell's dining room, now being transformed into the main exhibition hall of the new museum. Professor Williams had offered her a position as community outreach coordinator for the project, recognizing that her connection to the discovery made her the perfect ambassador for sharing its significance. A display case near the entrance held a photograph of David alongside his research notes. The Winters discovery, the plaque read, "A historian's legacy that changed a town." As Rebecca arranged informational materials for an upcoming community presentation, Lily entered carrying a small wooden box, one of the original containers from the cache, now emptied of its gold coins and returned to the family as a keepsake. "I found something, Mom," Lily said, showing how the box's false bottom concealed a hidden compartment. Inside was a handwritten note in David's familiar writing. For Rebecca and Lily, if you're reading this, you've found what I hoped would protect you if I couldn't. But the real treasure isn't the gold. It's the history we preserve, the stories we keep alive, and the legacy we leave for those who come after us. That's what I wanted to secure for you both. Not just financial security, but a connection to something enduring. All my love always, David. Rebecca traced her fingers over her late husband's handwriting, tears flowing freely. Now, around her, the museum took shape, a living monument to history preserved rather than forgotten, to value recognized rather than destroyed. Outside, tourists already gathered daily to hear the story of the widow who saved a piece of history by purchasing a failed restaurant for $400, only to discover that its greatest value lay hidden beneath the kitchen floor, not just in gold coins, but in the connections to the past that define a community's identity and shape its future. Victor Hargrove had seen only a property to be demolished for profit. David Winters had recognized the true value of preserving what came before. And Rebecca had found not just financial security, but a new purpose continuing the work her husband had begun, ensuring that history's treasures would be preserved for generations to come. As she placed David's final note in the display case, alongside his research, Rebecca felt a sense of completion. The desperate widow had become the guardian of history, turning a last-chance gamble into a legacy that would endure long after the value of gold had been forgotten. The next morning, Millbrook woke to news that spread through the town like wildfire. Civil War gold found under Hartwell's blazed across the front page of the Millbrook Gazette, accompanied by a photograph of Rebecca and Lily standing beside Professor Williams and the archaeology team. By noon, crowds had gathered behind police. Barricades erected around the old restaurant, hoping to glimpse the historic discovery that had been hidden beneath their town for over 150 years. Rebecca sat in Chief Anderson's office, still processing the whirlwind of events. Across from her, Thomas Williams and Sarah Jenkins from the archaeology department reviewed preliminary documentation of the find. The historical significance extends beyond the gold itself, Professor Jenkins explained, spreading photographs across the desk. The tunnel system appears to be part of a larger network that once connected key buildings throughout Millbrook. We've identified at least 3 additional exit points that may still be accessible. Chief Anderson leaned forward. What about legal ownership? This situation is unprecedented in my experience. Williams nodded thoughtfully. State historical preservation laws are clear about Civil War artifacts. The gold technically falls under cultural heritage protection, but as the discoverer with legal access rights, Mrs. Winters has a valid claim to a finder's percentage. And Hargrove? Rebecca asked quietly. The chief's expression hardened. He's been released on bail. The weapons charge is straightforward, but his lawyers are already maneuvering to establish his claim as property owner. He threatened my daughter, Rebecca said, her voice steady but firm. That's not something I can overlook, regardless of legal claims. We're taking those threats very seriously, Chief Anderson assured her. In the meantime, we've stationed officers at the site around the clock. Nobody enters those tunnels without proper authorization. As they left the police station, Rebecca and Lily found themselves surrounded by reporters, their cameras flashing in the bright morning sunlight. Mrs. Winters, how did you know about the gold? Was this why you purchased the restaurant? What are your plans for the money? Rebecca hesitated, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Lily stepped forward, her voice surprisingly steady. My father discovered the historical connection through years of research. He left the information for us before he passed away. This isn't just about gold. It's about preserving an important piece of Millbrook's history. Pride swelled in Rebecca's chest as her daughter handled the impromptu press conference with poise beyond her 16 years. When questions turned to the value of the find, Rebecca finally spoke up. The archaeological team is still documenting everything. Professor, Williams and the Historical Society will ensure this discovery is handled properly for the benefit of historical preservation. They managed to break away from the reporters and drive home, only to find more journalists waiting outside their apartment building. Neighbors peered curiously from windows and doorways, suddenly interested in the quiet widow and her daughter, who had made national news overnight. "We can't stay here," Rebecca realized. Not with all this attention. A call to Professor Williams resulted in a solution: temporary accommodation in a university guest apartment normally reserved for visiting scholars. By nightfall, they had packed essential belongings and relocated to the quiet campus housing, grateful for the anonymity it provided. That evening, as Lily researched the historical significance of their discovery online, Rebecca spread David's documents across the small dining table, studying them with new appreciation. His meticulous work had been more comprehensive than she'd initially realized, connecting historical accounts, property records, and engineering details into a compelling narrative that had ultimately proven accurate. "Mom, look at this," Lily called, turning her laptop screen. A news article showed Victor Hargrove giving his own press conference, his expression confidently professional as he addressed reporters outside his company headquarters. As the legal owner of the Hartwell property, Hargrove Properties acknowledges the historical significance of this discovery, he stated smoothly. "We're committed to working with authorities to preserve these artifacts while ensuring proper legal protocols are followed regarding ownership rights." Rebecca felt a chill at his calculated performance. Hargrove was repositioning himself publicly as a responsible steward of history rather than the threatening figure they'd encountered. "In the tunnels. He's trying to control the narrative," Lily observed with surprising insight. "And he has resources we don't," Rebecca added, thinking of Hargrove's connections throughout Millbrook, his company's sponsorship of community events, his seats on various boards, his political donations that had surely earned him influence with local officials. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Professor Williams entered, accompanied by an elegant woman in her 60s whom he introduced as Eleanor Prescott, a history professor specializing in Civil War economics. Dr. Prescott drove down from the Capitol as soon as she heard about the discovery, Williams explained. "She has particular insight that might interest you." The woman stepped forward, studying Rebecca intently. "Colonel Samuel Prescott, who wrote the letter you found with the gold, was my great-great-grandfather," she explained. "I've spent decades researching his role in the Civil War, particularly his activities in Millbrook during the final years of the conflict." Rebecca gestured toward the documents spread across the table. "Please, we'd appreciate any insights you can offer." Dr. Prescott carefully examined David's research, occasionally nodding with evident approval. "Your husband's work is impressive. He connected historical threads that have eluded professional historians for generations." "He never mentioned any of this," Rebecca admitted. "I had no idea he was researching Millbrook's Civil War history until I found his notes after he passed." Dr. Prescott smiled gently. "Some historians prefer to complete their research before sharing their theories. The gold cache has been rumored for generations, but most scholars dismissed it as local legend." She held up one of David's maps. "This tunnel system, it matches family documents I've preserved that most historians have never seen." "You have additional documentation about these tunnels?" Williams asked, professional interest clearly piqued. Dr. Prescott nodded. "Family journals, primarily." Samuel Prescott was stationed in Millbrook from 1863 to 1864, overseeing supply logistics. The tunnels were built under his direction as both emergency evacuation routes and secure transportation for sensitive materials. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a leather-bound journal. "This is Samuel's personal diary from that period. It contains detailed information about the tunnel construction and the decision to hide the regimental gold reserves." Rebecca accepted the journal with reverent hands, sensing its historical importance. This could help authenticate everything we found. More than that, Dr. Prescott replied. It establishes clear provenance for the gold, something that will become critically important in determining its legal status. Williams nodded seriously. Provenance changes everything. If we can establish that this was military gold rather than private property, it significantly alters the legal framework for who has claim to it now. Rebecca looked up sharply. How so? Military assets technically remain government property, regardless of time past, Williams explained. However, historical precedent has established that authenticated discoveries by private citizens with legal access rights are typically resolved through a finder's fee arrangement rather than complete government acquisition. What percentage would that typically involve? Rebecca asked cautiously. Usually between 25 and 35%, Dr. Prescott replied. The remainder would likely be preserved through national institutions, though some portion might remain in Millbrook if suitable facilities could be established. The implications were staggering. Even a quarter share of the gold's value would transform Rebecca and Lily's financial situation completely. More importantly, establishing the military provenance would undermine Hargrove's claims to ownership through the property. There's something else you should know, Dr. Prescott added, her expression turning serious. My great-great-grandfather's diary mentions that the gold cache in the main chamber was only part of what was hidden in Millbrook. A heavy silence fell over the room. There's more? Lily finally asked. Dr. Prescott nodded. According to family accounts, Samuel divided the regimental reserves as a security measure. The chamber you discovered contains what he documented officially. A second cache, possibly larger, was hidden elsewhere, its location entrusted to only his most trusted lieutenant. Williams let out a low whistle. A second cache would make this the most significant Civil War treasure discovery in modern history. Rebecca's mind returned to David's research materials, the architectural drawings, property records, and historical maps he'd collected. Had he suspected the existence of this second cache? Was there something in his notes she had overlooked? Does your family history indicate where this second cache might be located? She asked Dr. Prescott. The historian shook her head. Only vague references to where heaven meets earth, poetic language that has defied interpretation for generations. That night, after their visitors departed, Rebecca couldn't sleep. The phrase, where heaven meets earth, echoed in her mind, tantalizing in its ambiguity. She reviewed David's notes again, searching for any reference that might connect to this cryptic description. Around midnight, Lily joined her, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Can't sleep either? Rebecca shook her head. I keep thinking about what Dr. Prescott said. Where heaven meets earth. It feels like something David might have figured out. Lily picked up her father's sketches of downtown Millbrook, studying them thoughtfully. In the 1860s, what would they have considered the connection between heaven and earth? Churches, maybe, Rebecca suggested. We already found one tunnel exit near St. Paul's. But that was just an exit, not a hiding place, Lily countered. She traced the map with her finger, stopping suddenly. Wait, the old bell tower. Rebecca leaned closer. What bell tower? Dad took me there once when I was little. It's at the old courthouse, the tallest structure in Millbrook during the Civil War. He said it was designed by someone who also built churches. So it had these religious symbols carved into the support beams. Rebecca remembered now. The original courthouse with its distinctive bell tower that had survived even when the main building was replaced in the 1920s. Preserved as a historical landmark, it stood at the highest point in town, visible for miles around. A bell tower would literally be where heaven meets earth, Rebecca said slowly. A structure reaching toward heaven while anchored to the ground. They pored over David's materials again, looking for any reference to the courthouse or bell tower. Among his architectural drawings, they found detailed renderings of the tower's construction, with particular attention to its unusual foundation, deeper and more substantial than would typically be required for such a structure. He was focusing on the foundation, Rebecca realized. Just like with Hartwell's, looking for what might be hidden underneath. Morning found them back at Professor Williams' office, sharing their theory about the bell tower. The historian listened with growing excitement. It makes sense, he agreed. The courthouse would have been the center of civil authority, a logical place to hide reserves intended for post-war reconstruction. And the tower's position at the highest point in town would have made it a natural landmark for secret directions. Can we investigate it? Rebecca asked. Williams hesitated. The bell tower is a protected historical structure. We'd need special permissions to conduct any examination, especially anything involving the foundation, which would alert Hargrove. Lily pointed out. He sits on the Historical Preservation Board. Not necessarily, Williams replied thoughtfully. The university has an ongoing architectural study of historical structures in Millbrook. We could incorporate the bell tower into that study, perfectly legitimate academic research that wouldn't raise immediate suspicions. The plan took shape quickly. Dr. Jenkins from archaeology would extend her department's existing survey to include the bell tower, focusing on foundation stability assessments, a common concern with historical structures, ground penetrating. Radar and other non-invasive techniques would allow them to detect any anomalies beneath the tower without disturbing the structure itself. 3 days later, Rebecca and Lily met Williams and Jenkins at the university's archaeology lab to review preliminary findings. The professor displayed radar images on a large monitor, pointing to distinct anomalies beneath the tower foundation. There's definitely something there, Jenkins confirmed. A void space approximately 12 feet below ground level, extending beyond the tower's footprint. It doesn't match any known utility infrastructure or natural geological formation. Another tunnel system? Rebecca suggested. Jenkins nodded. Possibly connected to the network you discovered at Hartwell's, though we haven't identified a direct link yet. More importantly, there's something else. She highlighted a different section of the image. This dense area here, it's too regular to be natural. It appears to be a chamber containing objects of significant density. Gold would appear extremely dense on ground-penetrating radar, Williams noted, his voice carefully neutral despite the excitement evident in his expression. How do we access it? Rebecca asked. That's where things get complicated, Jenkins admitted. Unlike Hartwell's, the bell tower is actively maintained and regularly visited. Any exploration would require official authorization and public safety measures. Rebecca thought of Hargrove and his political connections. If we request official permission, word will reach Hargrove immediately. Perhaps that's not entirely negative, Williams suggested, surprising them. Consider this. Hargrove's claim to the Hartwell's discovery is already legally tenuous. If a second, potentially larger cache exists elsewhere, his attempt to claim ownership becomes even more difficult to sustain. You're suggesting we use the bell tower as a distraction? Rebecca asked, catching his implication. Williams smiled slightly. I'm suggesting that academic transparency about our historical research might serve multiple purposes. If Hargrove focuses his attention and resources on the bell tower, it might relieve pressure on the legal proceedings regarding the original discovery. The strategy was subtle but potentially effective. By publicly announcing the architectural study of the bell tower, presenting it as routine historical research without mentioning possible treasures, they might divert Hargrove's attention, while strengthening their position regarding the original find. The following week, as the university issued a press release about its expanded architectural study of historical structures, including the courthouse bell tower, Rebecca met with James Patterson, David's friend and attorney, who had delivered the storage locker key. The legal situation is evolving in your favor, Patterson explained, reviewing documents in his modest office. Dr. Prescott's family records, establishing the military provenance of the gold, significantly undermines Hargrove's property-based claims. Additionally, your salvage agreement gives you clear legal access rights that he can't retroactively revoke. What about his influence with local officials? Rebecca asked. Patterson's expression turned grim. That's where things get interesting. The State Attorney General's office has opened an investigation into Hargrove Properties' business practices, particularly regarding historical properties. It seems your case has raised questions about previous demolitions that may have destroyed historically significant structures. Rebecca hadn't anticipated this development. Is that connected to our discovery? Indirectly. Once your find made national news, preservationists began looking more closely at Hargrove's previous projects. Patterns emerged suggesting a concerning disregard for proper historical assessment before demolition. This external pressure on Hargrove created unexpected breathing room. With state authorities examining his business practices, his ability to leverage local connections against Rebecca was significantly diminished. Meanwhile, the archaeological documentation of the Hartwell's discovery continued, with each day revealing new historical significance. The tunnel system proved more extensive than initially believed, with connections to several downtown buildings, suggesting a sophisticated network designed for both military logistics and emergency evacuation. 2 weeks after the bell tower study was announced, Rebecca received an unexpected visitor at the university guest apartment. Mayor Eleanor Franklin, Millbrook's first female mayor and a dedicated advocate for downtown revitalization. Mrs. Winters, the mayor began after pleasantries were exchanged, your discovery has created quite a stir in our community. Rebecca nodded cautiously, uncertain of the mayor's position regarding the competing claims to the gold. Millbrook has struggled economically for decades, Mayor Franklin continued. Our downtown has been gradually abandoned as businesses relocated to highway developments. Historical buildings have been demolished rather than preserved because restoration seemed financially impractical. I understand Hargrove Properties has been behind many of those demolitions, Rebecca observed carefully. The mayor's expression remained diplomatically neutral. Mr. Hargrove has been an influential figure in local development. However, your discovery has created an opportunity to reimagine Millbrook's relationship with its history. She unfolded architectural renderings on the coffee table, professional designs showing the Hartwell building restored as a museum, with underground viewing areas providing safe public access to sections of the tunnel system. The State Historical Society has expressed interest in establishing a Civil War Heritage Center in Millbrook, using the Hartwell site as its centerpiece. This would bring tourism, educational opportunities, and revitalization to our downtown district. Rebecca studied the plans with growing appreciation. This looks remarkable. It would transform Millbrook, the mayor agreed. However, its feasibility depends largely on how the legal questions surrounding their discovery are resolved. The implication was clear. If Hargrove's claims prevailed and the gold was removed without benefiting the community, this vision would likely remain unrealized. What are you suggesting? Rebecca asked directly. A community-focused resolution, Mayor Franklin replied. One that honors your rights as the discoverer while creating lasting benefits for Millbrook. The City Council is prepared to formally support your legal position against Hargrove in exchange for a commitment to partner with the Historical Society on the Heritage Center development. The proposal was shrewdly conceived, offering Rebecca powerful political support when she most needed it, while ensuring that Millbrook would benefit from the discovery regardless of the ultimate legal determination regarding the gold's ownership. I'd need to review specific terms, Rebecca said carefully, but conceptually, this aligns perfectly with what David would have wanted. He loved Millbrook's history. Preserving it would honor his work. as the mayor departed, promising to have formal proposal documents delivered the following day, Rebecca felt a shifting of momentum. What had begun as a desperate gamble with her last $400 was evolving into something far more significant, not just personal financial salvation, but potentially the revitalization of an entire community. That evening, Professor Williams called with news that accelerated this transformation. The architectural study of the bell tower had received official approval for limited exploratory access to investigate the foundation anomalies. "We'll begin next week," he explained. "Small exploratory cameras inserted through minimally invasive access points. If we confirm the existence of another chamber or tunnel system, we'll apply for more comprehensive investigation permits." "Has Hargrove reacted to the bell tower study?" Rebecca asked. "Exactly as we anticipated," Williams confirmed. "He's filed formal requests to be included in any findings, citing his position on the Historical Preservation Board. He shifted resources toward monitoring the bell tower project, including legal personnel previously focused on contesting your claim to the Hartwell's discovery." The strategy was working, creating breathing room for the legal proceedings regarding the original find while potentially positioning them to document a second discovery under carefully controlled circumstances. The following day brought another unexpected development. Howard Jenkins, a retired bank manager who had served Millbrook First National for over 40 years, requested a meeting with Rebecca. They met at a quiet coffee shop away from downtown, where Jenkins nervously adjusted his glasses before speaking. "Mrs. Winters, I've been following news of your discovery with great interest. There's something you should know about Victor Hargrove and his connection to the Hartwell property." Rebecca leaned forward. Rebecca felt a chill at his calculated performance. Hargrove was repositioning himself publicly as a responsible steward of history rather than the threatening figure they'd encountered in the tunnels. "He's trying to control the narrative," Lily observed with surprising insight. "And he has resources we don't," Rebecca added, thinking of Hargrove's connections throughout Millbrook, his company's sponsorship of community events, his seats on various boards, his political donations. That had surely earned him influence with local officials. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Professor Williams entered, accompanied by an elegant woman in her 60s whom he introduced as Eleanor Prescott, a history professor specializing in Civil War economics. Dr. Prescott drove down from the Capitol as soon as she heard about the discovery, Williams explained. "She has particular insight that might interest you." The woman stepped forward, studying Rebecca intently. "Colonel Samuel Prescott, who wrote the letter you found with the gold, was my great-grandfather," she explained. "I've spent decades researching his role in the Civil War, particularly his activities in Millbrook during the final years of the conflict." Rebecca gestured toward the documents spread across the table. "Please, we'd appreciate any insights you can offer." Dr. Prescott carefully examined David's research, occasionally nodding with evident approval. "Your husband's work is impressive. He connected historical threads that have eluded professional historians for generations." "He never mentioned any of this," Rebecca admitted. "I had no idea he was researching Millbrook's Civil War history until I found his notes after he passed." Dr. Prescott smiled gently. "Some historians prefer to complete their research before sharing their theories. The gold cache has been rumored for generations, but most scholars dismissed it as local legend." She held up one of David's maps. "This tunnel system, it matches family documents I've preserved that most historians have never seen. You have additional documentation about these tunnels?" Williams asked, professional interest clearly piqued. Dr. Prescott nodded. "Family journals, primarily." Samuel Prescott was stationed in Millbrook from 1863 to 1864, overseeing supply logistics. The tunnels were built under his direction as both emergency evacuation routes and secure transportation for sensitive materials. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a leather-bound journal. This is Samuel's personal diary from that period. It contains detailed information about the tunnel construction and the decision to hide the regimental gold reserves. Rebecca accepted the journal with reverent hands, sensing its historical importance. This could help authenticate everything we found. More than that, Dr. Prescott replied. It establishes clear provenance for the gold, something that will become critically important in determining its legal status. Williams nodded seriously. Provenance changes everything. If we can establish that this was military gold rather than private property, it significantly alters the legal framework for who has claim to it now. Rebecca looked up sharply. How so? Military assets technically remain government property, regardless of time past, Williams explained. However, historical precedent has established that authenticated discoveries by private citizens with legal access rights are typically resolved through a finder's fee arrangement rather than complete government acquisition. What percentage would that typically involve? Rebecca asked cautiously. Usually between 25 and 35%, Dr. Prescott replied. The remainder would likely be preserved through national institutions, though some portion might remain in Millbrook if suitable facilities could be established. The implications were staggering. Even a quarter share of the gold's value would transform Rebecca and Lily's financial situation completely. More importantly, establishing the military provenance would undermine Hargrove's claims to ownership through the property. There's something else you should know, Dr. Prescott added, her expression turning serious. My great-great-grandfather's diary mentions that the gold cache in the main chamber was only part of what was hidden in Millbrook. A heavy silence fell over the room. There's more? Lily finally asked. Dr. Prescott nodded. According to family accounts, Samuel divided the regimental reserves as a security measure. The chamber you discovered contains what he documented officially. A second cache, possibly larger, was hidden elsewhere, its location entrusted to only his most trusted lieutenant. Williams let out a low whistle. A second cache would make this the most significant Civil War treasure discovery in modern history. Rebecca's mind returned to David's research materials, the architectural drawings, property records, and historical maps he'd collected. Had he suspected the existence of this second cache? Was there something in his notes she had overlooked? Does your family history indicate where this second cache might be located? She asked Dr. Prescott. The historian shook her head. Only vague references to where heaven meets earth, poetic language that has defied interpretation for generations. That night, after their visitors departed, Rebecca couldn't sleep. The phrase "where heaven meets earth" echoed in her mind, tantalizing in its ambiguity. She reviewed David's notes again, searching for any reference that might connect to this cryptic description. Around midnight, Lily joined her, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Can't sleep either? Rebecca shook her head. I keep thinking about what Dr. Prescott said. Where heaven meets earth. It feels like something David might have figured out. Lily picked up her father's sketches of downtown Millbrook, studying them thoughtfully. In the 1860s, what would they have considered the connection between heaven and earth? Churches, maybe, Rebecca suggested. We already found one tunnel exit near St. Paul's. But that was just an exit, not a hiding place, Lily countered. She traced the map with her finger, stopping suddenly. Wait, the old bell tower. Rebecca leaned closer. What bell tower? Dad took me there once when I was little. It's at the old courthouse, the tallest structure in Millbrook during the Civil War. He said it was designed by someone who also built churches, so it had these religious symbols carved into the support beams. Rebecca remembered now, the original courthouse with its distinctive bell tower that had survived even when the main building was replaced in the 1920s. Preserved as a historical landmark, it stood at the highest point in town, visible for miles around. A bell tower would literally be where heaven meets earth, Rebecca said slowly. A structure reaching toward heaven while anchored to the ground. They pored over David's materials again, looking for any reference to the courthouse or bell tower. Among his architectural drawings, they found detailed renderings of the tower's construction, with particular attention to its unusual foundation, deeper and more substantial than would typically be required for such a structure. He was focusing on the foundation, Rebecca realized. Just like with Hartwell's, looking for what might be hidden underneath. Morning found them back at Professor Williams' office, sharing their theory about the bell tower. The historian listened with growing excitement. It makes sense, he agreed. The courthouse would have been the center of civil authority, a logical place to hide reserves intended for post-war reconstruction. And the tower's position at the highest point in town would have made it a natural landmark for secret directions. Can we investigate it? Rebecca asked. Williams hesitated. The bell tower is a protected historical structure. We'd need special permissions to conduct any examination, especially anything involving the foundation. Which would alert Hargrove, Lily pointed out. He sits on the Historical Preservation Board. Not necessarily, Williams replied thoughtfully. The university has an ongoing architectural study of historical structures in Millbrook. We could incorporate the bell tower into that study, perfectly legitimate academic research that wouldn't raise immediate suspicions. The plan took shape quickly. DR dawn broke over Millbrook with golden light illuminating the courthouse bell tower, its weathered copper dome gleaming against the pale morning sky. Rebecca stood across the square, watching as university vehicles assembled near the historic structure. Today marked the beginning of the exploration that might confirm their theory about the second gold cache, the one hidden where heaven meets earth. Nervous? Lily asked, joining her mother with 2 cups of coffee from the nearby cafe. Rebecca accepted the cup gratefully. Not nervous exactly, more like aware of the stakes. This could change everything, not just for us, but for Millbrook. The town had already transformed in the week since their initial discovery. Tourism had increased dramatically, with history enthusiasts and treasure hunters arriving daily to photograph the Hartwell building and attend impromptu lectures given by local historians suddenly in demand. Downtown shops reported their best sales in decades. The previously quiet square now buzzed with activity, even at this early hour. Professor Williams approached, clipboard in hand, his expression professionally neutral despite the excitement. Rebecca knew he felt. We're ready to begin. The ground-penetrating radar team will establish baseline readings before we attempt any physical exploration. Across the square, Rebecca noticed Victor Hargrove's sleek car pull up. The developer emerged in an impeccably tailored suit, accompanied by a man she recognized as his attorney. They stood watching the university team, Hargrove's expression unreadable behind designer sunglasses. He's not wasting any time, Rebecca observed quietly. He can observe all he wants, Williams replied. This is an approved university research project. His presence changes nothing. The morning progressed with methodical precision as technicians established equipment around the tower's base. Curious onlookers gathered, held back by temporary barriers and signs explaining the historical research underway. Local media had arrived too, cameras documenting what had become Millbrook's most compelling ongoing story. By midday, the radar team had confirmed their initial findings, substantial anomalies beneath the tower consistent with constructed spaces rather than natural formations. Dr. Jenkins joined them with printouts showing more detailed imaging. The data is compelling, she explained, indicating circular patterns beneath the foundation. These regular formations approximately 15 feet below ground level are almost certainly man-made. They appear to be rooms or chambers arranged in a pattern around a central point. Like a vault with antechambers, Williams suggested, studying the images. Exactly, Jenkins agreed. The density readings are particularly interesting. Several concentrated areas show signatures consistent with metal accumulation, significantly denser than surrounding materials. Rebecca's pulse quickened. Gold would read as very dense, wouldn't it? Jenkins nodded, her professional caution evident despite the excitement in her eyes. We can't confirm specific metals without physical samples, but yes, gold would create exactly this kind of density. Signature. Across the square, Hargrove had been joined by two more men carrying legal briefcases. They appeared to be in intense discussion, occasionally gesturing toward the bell tower. "He's mobilizing," Williams observed. "Likely preparing injunctions or other legal maneuvers to assert claims if we confirm anything significant. Can he stop the exploration?" Rebecca asked anxiously. "Not easily. The university has proper permissions for this research. However, he could potentially complicate access to any discoveries through various legal challenges." Rebecca thought of the mayor's proposal regarding community partnership. "Perhaps it's time to consider a more collaborative approach." Williams raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" "That history belongs to everyone. That Millbrook deserves to benefit from what's been hidden beneath its streets for generations." That afternoon, as the technical team prepared for the next phase, inserting micro cameras through small access points in the foundation, Rebecca requested a meeting with Mayor Franklin. They met in the mayor's office overlooking the town square, where the university's exploration continued under increasingly bright media spotlights. "We may be on the verge of confirming a second discovery," Rebecca explained. "Potentially even more significant than the first." Mayor Franklin's expression remained carefully measured. "The town is already buzzing with speculation. Hargrove has been meeting with council members individually, attempting to secure support for various legal positions." "Which is why I'm here," Rebecca replied, placing a folder on the desk between them. "I've reviewed your proposal for partnership regarding the Hartwell discovery. I'd like to expand it to include whatever we might find beneath the bell tower." The mayor opened the folder, scanning Rebecca's annotations to the original agreement. "This is remarkably generous, Mrs. Winters." Rebecca had modified the proposal to establish a Millbrook Historical Trust that would receive 40% of her finder's fee from both discoveries, dedicated to downtown revitalization through historical preservation. The funds would support restoration of significant buildings, development of museums and educational facilities, and establishment of a scholarship program bearing David's name. "My husband loved this town's history," Rebecca explained simply. "This honors his work while ensuring Millbrook benefits for generations to come." Mayor Franklin studied her thoughtfully. "This partnership would fundamentally transform our community's relationship with its past and its future." "But what about Mr. Hargrove's opposition?" Rebecca smiled slightly. "I'm hoping we might neutralize that as well. Would you be willing to host a public forum this evening? I believe it's time to change the narrative." The impromptu town hall meeting was announced that afternoon, drawing a capacity crowd to the high school auditorium by early evening. Residents filled every seat, with standing room only along the back wall. Local television stations had set up cameras, recognizing the potential significance of the gathering. Mayor Franklin opened the proceedings, explaining that recent discoveries had created both opportunities and challenges for Millbrook that warranted community discussion. She then introduced Rebecca, whose appearance drew spontaneous applause, a clear indication of where public sentiment had shifted. Rebecca approached the podium, momentarily overwhelmed by the sea of faces before her. She had never been comfortable with public speaking, but tonight something greater than her personal discomfort was at stake. "6 months ago," she began, her voice growing steadier as she spoke, "I was a widow struggling to make ends meet, trying to understand why my husband had been researching our town's Civil War history. Today, I stand before you because that research led to a discovery that appears to be just the beginning of Millbrook's historical reawakening. She described the tunnel system, the initial gold cache, and the ongoing exploration of the bell tower foundation, careful to present facts without speculation that might compromise the research. What we've found doesn't belong to any individual, she continued. It's Millbrook's heritage, physical evidence of our community's role in pivotal historical events. The question before us isn't who owns these discoveries, but how they can best serve this community's future while honoring its past. Rebecca outlined her partnership proposal with the Historical Society and the city, explaining the Millbrook Historical Trust and its potential impact on downtown revitalization. As she described specific projects that could be funded: museum development, building restoration, educational programs, she could see heads nodding throughout the audience. This approach ensures that Millbrook's historical treasures remain in Millbrook, benefiting local businesses through tourism, creating jobs through preservation projects, and establishing our community as a significant destination for historical education. From the back of the room, Victor Hargrove's voice cut through the approving murmurs. And what about property rights, Mrs. Winters? The foundation of our legal system. All heads turned as Hargrove walked confidently down the center aisle. Rather than appearing intimidated by the clearly supportive crowd, he seemed to relish the confrontation. The Hartwell property belongs to my company. Legal ownership conveys rights to what's discovered on that property. Sentiment doesn't change established law. Rebecca met his gaze steadily. You're absolutely right about the importance of legal rights, Mr. Hargrove, which is why I've had extensive discussions with the State Historical Society about applicable statutes regarding discoveries of historical significance. She gestured to Professor Williams, who joined her at the podium with a bound legal document. State code specifically addresses artifacts of historical significance discovered on private property, Williams explained. When those artifacts relate to military activities or governmental functions, as this Confederate military gold clearly does, their disposition falls under historical preservation statutes rather than simple property law. Hargrove's attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but the developer waved him off. Even accepting that interpretation, my company still maintains significant claims as the property owner where the discovery occurred, which is precisely why we're proposing partnership rather than adversarial proceedings, Rebecca responded. Legal battles would likely freeze these discoveries in litigation for years, benefiting only attorneys while Millbrook loses the immediate economic and cultural opportunities these findings present. She gestured to Mayor Franklin, who displayed architectural renderings on the large screen behind them, beautiful visualizations of a revitalized downtown with the Hartwell building and bell tower as centerpieces of a historical district. This is what partnership could create, the mayor explained. A transformed downtown that honors our history while building economic prosperity. Initial projections suggest annual tourism revenue exceeding $12 million once facilities are fully developed, creating over 200 permanent jobs. The audience's reaction was immediate: applause, exclamations, neighbors turning to one another in animated conversation. Even some of Hargrove's business associates appeared impressed by the vision presented. Hargrove himself seemed momentarily thrown off balance by the comprehensive nature of the proposal and its obvious public appeal. His expression hardened as he assessed the room's reaction. Attractive renderings don't change legal realities, he insisted, though with less conviction than before. My company has invested significantly in downtown properties based on existing development plans, which could be adapted rather than abandoned, Rebecca suggested. Your architectural expertise would be invaluable in restoration projects that would ultimately increase property values throughout downtown. Historic districts consistently outperform conventional developments in long-term economic metrics. She was offering him a path to graceful participation rather than opposition, a way to maintain his influence while adapting to the new reality their discoveries had created. The economic arguments were calculated to appeal to his business instincts, while the public nature of this forum made continued opposition increasingly costly to his community standing. For several moments, Hargrove stood silently, visibly calculating. Finally, he nodded slightly. "I would need to review specific proposals with my legal team, of course. But Hargrove Properties has always supported Millbrook's economic development. If historical preservation now represents the most viable path forward, we're certainly open to discussion." It wasn't capitulation, but it was movement, a public acknowledgement that absolute opposition was no longer tenable. The community's enthusiastic response to the partnership vision had shifted the dynamic, making collaboration more advantageous than confrontation. As the town hall continued with questions from residents and business owners, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced since before David's death, a sense of belonging to something larger than herself, of contributing to a community's future. What had begun as a desperate gamble with her last $400 had evolved into a catalyst for transformation that extended far beyond her personal circumstances. The following morning brought news that accelerated this transformation. The university team had successfully inserted micro-cameras into the foundation beneath the bell tower, capturing images that confirmed their most optimistic theories. "It's extraordinary," Dr. Jenkins explained, displaying video footage on her laptop for Rebecca, Lily, and Professor Williams. A completely intact vault system with multiple chambers. The central room contains what appear to be wooden crates, similar to those you found at Hartwell's, but in greater quantity. Preliminary estimates suggest at least 3 times the volume of the first cache. The footage showed a circular central chamber approximately 20 feet in diameter, with smaller rooms radiating outward like spokes on a wheel, stacked wooden. Crates bearing military markings lined the walls of the main chamber, their surfaces remarkably preserved in the sealed environment. "How do we access it?" Rebecca asked, studying the architectural configuration. "That's where things get interesting," Jenkins replied, switching to a different video feed. "The system includes what appears to be an intentionally designed access point, a brick-lined shaft with iron handholds embedded in the wall, leading directly to the central chamber. It's currently sealed by what looks like a stone plug, but the design clearly indicates it was meant to be opened from above." Williams leaned forward, examining the footage closely. Where exactly would this access point be located in relation to the current structure? Jenkins opened a blueprint overlay. Directly beneath the bell tower's central support column, the access shaft appears to have been incorporated into the original foundation design, disguised as part of the structural support system. The architect who designed the tower must have been involved in creating the vault, Rebecca realized. That's why David had collected so much information about the building's construction. Exactly, Jenkins agreed. This wasn't an improvised hiding place. It was a sophisticated, purpose-built secure storage facility disguised as architectural infrastructure. Quite remarkable engineering for the 1860s. Williams was already making calls, his excitement barely contained behind professional language. "We'll need expanded permissions for structural assessment." "Yes, potential foundation integrity concerns based on preliminary findings. Immediate safety evaluation recommended." By noon, the university had secured emergency permits to conduct a more extensive examination of the bell tower foundation. Citing potential structural concerns required immediate assessment. The permits allowed for controlled opening of foundation elements as needed to evaluate stability, language that would permit access to the shaft they'd discovered without explicitly mentioning the vault or its contents. As equipment was assembled for this next phase, Rebecca noticed increased activity around Hargrove as well. The developer had established a command post of sorts in a cafe across from the courthouse square, where a rotating cast of attorneys, business associates, and political connections came and went throughout the day. He was clearly mobilizing resources while maintaining the public stance of potential cooperation he'd adopted at the town hall. "He's preparing for multiple scenarios," Mayor Franklin observed, joining Rebecca as they watched the activity from the courthouse steps. "Legally challenging our access if possible, positioning for maximum advantage if not." Victor Hargrove didn't build his empire by conceding easily. "What's your assessment of his influence with the council?" Rebecca asked. The mayor considered carefully. "Diminished but not eliminated. The public sentiment is clearly with your partnership vision, but Hargrove has deep relationships with business interests who remain influential. Some council members will be reluctant to oppose him directly, regardless of public opinion. Then we need to make cooperation more advantageous than opposition," Rebecca concluded. "For everyone involved." That afternoon, as university engineers prepared to open the access shaft beneath the bell tower, Rebecca took an unexpected action. She approached Hargrove directly at his cafe headquarters, requesting a private conversation. His surprise was evident, but he agreed, dismissing his associates to a nearby table. "Bold move, Mrs. Winters. What can I do for you?" "You can help. Make history rather than fight it," Rebecca replied candidly. "The exploration beneath the bell tower will proceed regardless of legal challenges. The university has proper permits, and public support is overwhelmingly behind the historical preservation approach." Hargrove's expression remained carefully neutral. "Your point being?" "That you have a choice between being remembered as the developer who tried to bulldoze Millbrook's history for profit, or as the visionary businessman who helped transform the community through historical revitalization." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.